of our government's decision to eradicate Mycoplasma bovis. I'm joined by Minister O'Connor, who will speak to our success so far in getting M. bovis under control. Our beef and dairy sectors are the backbone of our economy. COVID has demonstrated that once again. While the rest of the country was in lockdown, agricultural production continued, earning us much needed export receipts. And just like with COVID, going hard and early to beat M. bovis has paid dividends for us. In both cases, the economic benefits of our strong biosecurity and health responses are obvious and have only enhanced our international brand as a producer of high-quality, safe food. Our economic success lies in our value add, and it lies in our reputation. And in a post-COVID world, safe food will be increasingly sought out. Once again, our health response can enhance our economic success. I do want to hand over to Minister O'Connor, but in doing so, I do want to note that our success with M. bovis at this point in the journey does place us amongst the world's first to have ever attempted to eradicate M. bovis. And while there's a journey left to travel, I'm very proud of the work that's being done by MPI, the industry, farmers, but also the Minister. So, Minister O'Connor.
Kia ora. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thursday marks the 2-year anniversary of this government's decision to attempt what no other country in the world has, that is to eradicate cattle disease Mycoplasma bovis. 2 years on, and the technical data is showing that we are on track. The key measure of success, the estimated dissemination rate, or EDR, shows strongly that we have M. bovis firmly in our sights. The same as with COVID. If the rate is greater than 1, then the disease is growing. If it's below 1, we're shrinking the disease. The EDR for M. bovis is now at 0.4, which is down from over 2 at the start of the outbreak, so we're looking harder and finding fewer infected animals. We currently have 17 active properties and 232 that have been cleared of the disease and are back up and operating. The decision to pursue an eradication strategy was made jointly with our industry partners, New Zealand Beef and Lamb and Dairy NZ. Had we left this disease to run rampant, I'm not sure that our dairy and beef sectors would have been able to weather the economic storm of COVID-19 and the challenges of drought conditions as well as they have. Beef and dairy export prices have held up. In fact, there was record demand for our meat. In March, total red meat monthly exports topped $1 billion for the first time. This shows that the sectors are well placed to lead us out of this economic crisis. As we have with our response to COVID-19, this government showed leadership, made the tough decision, and we've managed this eradication effort with discipline and with focus. There's no question M. bovis has a huge impact on the sector, and particularly on those affected families and farmers. Although there is still a long way to go, our farming community should be really proud of themselves. I'm certainly very proud of them and their commitment to eradicate M. bovis. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Right, thank you. Open to questions.
What do you say to the farmers who feel like the government's put too much of an emphasis on M. bovis in terms of the money that you've spent and the time taken, and not enough on the drought and something they're feeling the pinch of right now?
Look, M. bovis is a long program. We can't take our foot off the pedal. If we were to do that, then the disease might run out and it cost us more. So I think most of them understand we need to continue to focus on the eradication of M. bovis, and over a 10-year period, we think we'll get there.
Could we be putting a foot more on the pedal then when it comes to support farmers who are suffering because of the drought?
Look, we've used advice from federated farmers, from the rural support trusts on the ground as to how we should best support farmers. Some of it's direct, some of it's with advice. We still take that advice before coming up with schemes of our own.
As you move to eradicate M. bovis, there were some criticisms directed at the farming community regarding the low uptake of NAPE, the usage of those sort of systems. Are you seeing evidence that more farmers are using that system?
Look, when we came into government, NAIT was effectively dysfunctional. We've upgraded that system. We've ensured that farmers know the importance of it. And now we have a high level of compliance. There have been warning letters. There have been prosecutions. I believe that farmers now understand its value and, for the most part, are adhering to, the law.
How many cattle have been culled as part of the eradication process?
It's over 150,000, but that's about 1% of the total number that we would normally kill in the processing over a 2-year period.
Minister, did your experiences with trying to eradicate bovis influence how you chose to approach COVID in any way, and if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, I do recall that at the time we were making the really weighty decision around eradication for M. bovis, one of the things that was raised with us was that it just hadn't been done before. But working alongside experts in the field and our farming community, we jointly made a decision that it was worth us putting in that effort to try and get New Zealand M. bovis free. Our primary sector is so valuable to us that that was an effort I absolutely stand by. The learnings from it, listen to the science and the evidence, but don't be afraid to have some faith in your ability to do something that might not have been done elsewhere.
Do you have an update on the enforcement action that has been taken against farmers in terms of those numbers around that?
Look, I don't have them, but hundreds of letters, warning letters have been sent out. There have been some fines imposed. Prior to that coming in, I think there'd only been 5 warning letters sent out to farmers. So a huge lift in both the enforcement, oversight and advice going to farmers.
On uptake, is there any way of measuring uptake? Or do we have data on that? Or
No, I haven't seen the latest figure. I think it was something like about 60% uptake now. So there's still some farmers who are not technically adhering to all the parts of it, but all of them understand that they have to buy into this pretty quickly.
Non-compliance is still quite high. Are you sure that we can actually say that we have eradicated this, but we don't know how stock are moving around the country?
Well, no. With most of the stock being moved, that is being enforced. I guess the issue on farmers with tags that might fall out, and so we're working with farmers, making sure the system both of tagging, of recording with technology, is updated so it's a bit more user friendly, and actually farmers can plug that information into the system a bit more effectively.
Are you confident then on moving day that all of those herds moving around, that they will be traced and tracked properly?
Absolutely. What I can say is that where we have movement of animals around the country, we are scrutinising that very, very carefully.
What are the reasons for that vaccine?
Did you have
what are the reasons for the non-compliance that you've seen coming through?
Some of it's just simply on-farm practice. Some of the tags fall out. We've got to make sure the design is right. We've got to make sure that farmers can plug the data into the system. We've got issues with rural broadband for some of them. So it's technical non-compliance more than it is farmers ignoring the system. And so we've got to work with them to make sure that it does operate more effectively. But when it comes to the shifting of animals around the country, we're right onto that and ensuring that none of that would contribute in any way to the spread of M. bovis.
Who pays for NAIT? Do farmers pay to access the system, or does the government subsidise it in some way?
Farmers pay to access. They buy the tags, and it's a joint venture between the industry bodies and government to ensure that NAIT runs properly. And so we've updated the legislation, and we've put more money in to make sure that the system works.
On vaccines, what's the plan if no successful vaccine is developed?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind that will be critical for economies and countries like New Zealand being able to lift some of the restrictions. One is a vaccine, the other is successful treatment. So there's perhaps been less coverage around that, but that is still a very important part of the response to COVID. And also testing that can be done quickly and that we can have security knowing that it's giving accurate results. So it's not just about a vaccine going forward.
On the vaccine, what would the development of a vaccine against COVID mean for New Zealand?
Look, the vaccine would be a game changer for the world. What's important is New Zealand has a stake in its development, its manufacturing and its distribution. We've developed a strategy, including investment in some of the global efforts into research and development, including domestically, and gearing up our manufacturing capability for the eventuality where a vaccine may be then provided to be able to be manufactured elsewhere. So New Zealand is positioning itself well for the future of vaccine development.
Do we see a situation where New Zealand would be able to open up the borders a bit using rapid tests to test people before they get on a plane and after they get off the
I do believe that's a possibility. I mean, there is at the moment testing of or some work being done around 20-minute testing, but it is in the early stages. The success rate is, or the accuracy rate is not high. And certainly one of the issues that you will have seen even through our reporting is that even with the more accurate testing we've had, which takes more like a 24-hour period, you still do get false negatives. And so that is one of the hurdles to be overcome, but there's obviously a lot of R&D going into that.
What would your response be to calls for a Royal Commission to be called into how the government's handled the COVID crisis?
We've always obviously been open to accountability. In fact, all the way through, where Parliament hasn't been able to function as it usually would, we've created mechanisms to make sure we are held to account. What I am mindful of is that we are still in the middle of the response, and I do think we want to get ourselves in a position where we can look back with a bit of hindsight, and at the moment, it's very early days.
Facing Todd Muller down for the first question time with him in a few minutes. His question to you is much more detailed than usual Leader of the Opposition questions. It's not a do you stand by your statements, it's a specific forecasting thing. Are you looking forward to that showdown, and what do you make of that more kind of specific type of questioning?
Oh, I'm not sure I would characterise it in that way. Look, question time is is an important part of our democracy. It's an important part of our accountability systems here in Parliament. Obviously, this is one day of many when it comes to questions, and one event of many when it comes to our work as a government on COVID. So it's an hour of a very busy day.
So it seems that there are a number of people connected to the, I've forgotten the name of that movie, sorry, the sequel with the blue people.
Avatar.
Thank you, Avatar.
Sequel with the blue people. I thought I was going Smurfs, but okay.
A number of executives in New Zealand quarantining to prepare filming for Avatar 2. So they've been given exemptions, I'm guessing, to come into the country. Do you know how many people, foreigners, have been granted exemptions to do this type of work?
Yeah, so the areas where we've had requests for exemptions, and that would need to go to the Minister of Economic Development, have been areas like maintenance of critical infrastructure where there's specialty knowledge required. Keeping in mind these are individuals that have to then commit to quarantine before coming in. And so primarily we've had some, I think, from my recollection, the aviation industry as well. And of course then you're referring to some in the film industry. So it's been a range of different industries. The number of applications has been small, and therefore the number has been relatively small as well. But I don't want to set you wrong with the exact figures. I did speak to Minister Twyford about the exemptions regime over the weekend. We are just going to make sure that Cabinet checks in again, because there are some individuals who are in some really sticky situations. They have perhaps family members or loved one here, lives here, and haven't fitted into the category of returning. I do want to make sure that we address that issue before we see an opening up of the exemptions regime, because I do think that will raise inequity and issues of fairness.
Those issues though,
Sorry,
because there are people who have homes in New Zealand, they got caught outside of the country through no fault of their own.
Yeah.
And they're stuck in places around the world that they can't get in. They've been trying, hitting their heads against the wall.
This is the exact issue I've just acknowledged. That is where I wouldn't want to see us getting too far ahead in an exemptions regime where actually there's legitimate requests being made, but we still haven't dealt with the ongoing issue of those individuals who haven't been citizens or permanent residents but have been caught outside of the country but actually have their lives here. So we do need to work through that issue.
Damage been done in that case?
Oh, look, I would absolutely acknowledge that there are a number of people who for various reasons either have been able to come home in terms of our border controls but haven't been able to find flights, who have had loss that they haven't been able to come back for, to grieve for family members. There's been a lot of hurt through COVID-19, and we are doing our best in the environment we're in now to try and address some of those issues where we can. Yeah.
Ian Lees-Galloway yesterday said that it could actually be some time before those people could come back to New Zealand, and the government needed to make a decision on whether they instead prioritised Kiwis for the limited number of jobs that there will be.
You might be talking about people with the legal right to, so there's a few different categories. There's those who are already living here, have family here, have housing here. And then there are those who might already have been issued with a legal right to come to New Zealand to work but haven't entered into the country yet. In those cases, you'd understand why. We always want to make sure that people who have work visas actually have work, and we are in a very different situation now than we were several months ago. So there's a couple of different categories that need to be worked through.
We had a conversation with Scott Morrison recently, or any kind of catch up or update on the Trans-Tasman bubble?
I spoke to him this morning, but again, we stay in regular contact, as I've said many times before, because we are working closely together and also facing similar issues. Look, in that most recent conversation, just reaffirming again our commitment to working on that Trans-Tasman bubble, we spoke about the fact that our officials are talking with one another, and we're continuing on in earnest with preparations.
Is it actually progressing? Is there any kind of timeline?
We've always been working towards the goal. We are both at a phase of reopening up, of easing restrictions, and so there is a degree to which we want to see that play out a little bit for us both to be assured that we have the virus well under control, and in the meantime, we're working on getting our borders ready.
Is it a matter of months as opposed to weeks until the Trans-Tasman bubble will be established?
I've been cautious about putting timelines on it because even if you'd asked me a month ago, would we be here now making the progress that New Zealand has made? I might have been a bit more hesitant. So I have been cautious about putting timelines down, but it is fair to say that we are both working in earnest and we're both very keen to make it happen as soon as we safely can.
Tangible further developments that came out of that phone call?
Oh, just merely the fact that we were acknowledging that our officials were already talking to each other and we just talked about some of the detail they're working through. Yeah. Make this the last question.
What the situation is with the labour market tests and jobs in the light of the Immigration Minister's comments? Is it that people on temporary work visas in the country will eventually, their job will eventually have to undergo a labour market test? People who were stuck outside the border, will their jobs have to undergo a labour market test before they're allowed back in?
And so, as I've just indicated, that there are a series of decisions that are still being worked through there, but there are a particular group who are, I would say, a smaller number who are particularly distressed by their separation from their home. And that's where we really want to prioritise working through that. Then there are others, like those who, for instance, have the legal right to study in New Zealand but have never come into New Zealand to take up study. And so there's a number of issues to work through there in terms of their study rights, but also quarantine and the border restrictions. So a number of decisions that still need to be made. Okay, thank you everyone.